Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our third speaker for today's AKR, Ms. Fadhiilah Ismail. Ms. Fadhiilah is a social worker who started her early career as an executive in a local mosque. She has been in social services for almost a decade. Her wide-ranging experiences include working with married minor couples, multi-stressed families, and outreach works to individuals and families experiencing housing and shelter issues. She is a graduate of International Islamic University Malaysia and holds Masters of Social Work from Singapore University of Social Sciences. She presently serves as a medical social worker in Changi General Hospital, where she is part of a multidisciplinary team that advocates and facilitates the continuity of care and support to patients as well as their family members. And inshallah, Ms. Fadhiilah will be talking on the topic of understanding grief and when to seek help. So Ms. Fadhiilah, if you're ready, I invite you to the stage.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here today in the presence of esteemed speakers, Sakinah, Ustaz Fizar. Sakinah, I just want to share a bit. Sakinah was my classmate, and I'm very proud to be here with her today. We were classmates in secondary school before. So now today she's a doctor, and I'm just an ikan bilis lah here. So today I will be talking about the topic of overcoming grief. And this topic is very relevant. And why is this relevant? All of us, we have gone through grief of some sort in one way or another. And as has been shared by the previous speakers, even our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he did not escape feeling of grief. So today, inshallah, I would like to share more about how we can overcome our grief. And hopefully we can, this sharing will be beneficial to all of us here. So, this is the clicker. Okay, so the last time I attended a grief workshop, it took me 3 full days. And today I am very challenged to present all these topics within 30 minutes. Okay, so we will do this together, 30 minutes, chop chop. Okay, so the first, so these are the things that I would like to share with you, inshallah. So I would like to share a bit more about grief, understanding of grief. So in order for you to overcome grief, you need to understand what grief is. So when you understand more, hopefully you are able to cope better. And then I would like to talk about planning for life. We talk about grief, about death, the whole day, right? So let's talk about life. How do you plan for your life? How do you plan for your end of life? And I would like to share with you about complicated grief and where you can get help. So I will start with definition of grief. So what is grief and why do we grieve? So grief is basically, it is a psychosocial emotional response to an actual or an anticipated loss. Why do we grieve? We are all human beings, we are social beings, and as human beings, we form attachments to one another, or we form attachment to our things, or we form attachments to whatever we have now. So as we form our attachments, we give meaning to this relationship that we have. So when I get married, for example, I'm not just marrying a husband, I'm not just gaining a husband, for example, I am attaching meanings to that. I will become a companion, for example. In marriage, I gain a companion. In marriage, I gain a housemate. So as we embark in our life, as we form relationship, we put meanings to it. And when we lose this attachment, when we lose this relationship, it is more than just grieving. It is also a loss of meaning. And how do we adjust to all those? And then. So you can see here that I put here, it is a reaction to a loss. A loss can be something which has actually happened to us, like a death. It has happened, or we got retrenched from a job. So that has happened. But there is also this thing we call anticipatory grief. So anticipatory grief is basically, I give you an example. We are caregiver, for example. We are caregiver for an elderly mother. And our mother has dementia. We know that we will be losing our mother. Before her death, we will be losing her in terms of her function, and towards the end, we will be losing her. She will not even remember us. We will have a shell of a person, but that person will not exist. So in anticipating all this, we have started to grieve already. Yeah, so that is anticipated grief. Okay, so what do we need to know about grief? Grief is natural. Grief is normal. And if you do not grieve, that's not very normal. So it is very natural, very human response to grieve as you lose something, as you lose a person, as you lose your belonging, as you lose anything that belongs to you. So that is very natural. And grief is a process. It is it is not a task that you have to go through, you have to achieve it. It is not a task. So basically, when I put here process, it means it is a series of experiences. So you will experience all these little things. This is something that you cannot escape from. And inshallah, hopefully, when you have gone through all these experiences, you will reach your healing, because that's what we want. We want to heal from this grief, and we want to continue on living. So it is a process. And everybody's journey in grief is different. My grieving journey is not the same as your journey. My husband's journey is not the same as mine in his grief for his loss, for whatever loss. So everybody has different type of grief. And to say that, and if we see someone who is grieving and we say, hey, come on, snap out of it, it shouldn't take this long, we shouldn't say that, because our journey in grief is very unique. So some similar words that you may have, Okay, so this was it flash before? So this is what I was talking about. So I would also like to share with you some words that are similar but not the same. So when we talk about grief, these are some of the terms that you need to take note of. So grief, it starts from loss. We lose someone, we lose something, and we will have this reaction. Grief, as I have shared before, it is just a response to any loss, okay, to any loss. And I cannot see your grief. Your grief is inside. It is internal. When you scream, when you cry, when you just do not want to move from your bed, that is your symptoms of grief. But your grief is inside. You carry it with you inside. I cannot see your grief. So that's why we never judge a person for the way they grieve, because it's inside. Bereavement is something specific to death of a loved person. So when we talk about a death of a person, that is bereavement. So grief can be anything: loss of job, loss of limbs, loss of your health. Bereavement is specific to a death of a person. And mourning. So what is mourning? Mourning, okay, so we talk about grief. Grief is internal. Bereavement is specific to loss of death. So we have mourning. Mourning is basically your grief gone public. So grief is inside, right? So how do you manifest it? It is through your mourning. So the way we mourn is specific to our culture. Some cultures, they advocate you have to scream. For some culture, you are not allowed to bathe. For some culture, they wear armbands. To quote an example, statewide, if we are in mourning, we fly our flag half-mast. Those are mourning. So in our tradition, to quote an example, a wife of a deceased husband, they have to go through this period of iddah. So that is also some kind of mourning. But we need to also note that mourning, even though it is an expression of grief, it is possible for you to mourn without having this sense of feeling of acute grief. This acute grief may have passed, but you are still in mourning. And for some people, they have stopped mourning, but the grief is still with them. The grief will stay on with them. So, how does grief look like? Salah. Salah. Yeah, so how does grief look like? So grief, it is very hard for us to describe, right? So we can give you characteristics. So we have divided this characteristic into psycho-emotional characteristics. Basically, confusion, you feel sad. Not all people, when they feel grief, they feel sad. They can feel confused. They can feel angry. They can feel guilty, especially for those people who have been caregivers for a very long time and they see the loved one suffering and then the loved one pass away. And they would be torn between feeling guilty or happy. And then they would feel, no, maybe they would feel happy and relieved. At least my suffering from taking care of this person has ended. But then they will start to feel guilty. So it is just a whole gamut of expression inside you. It takes a lot of, a different psycho-emotional characteristics. I would also like to share with you this part, sensory experience. It can be auditory. Sometimes people can just hear, out of the blue, you can hear the voice of the person who has passed away. That is also a symptom of grief. I remember when I was in secondary 2 doing my homework in the room, my grandmother has just passed away, and out of the blue, I smell a lotion that she used to wear before she passed on. But then I'm not sure whether I was grieving at that time, because I remember I was running out of the room because I was freaking out, like, wah, I smell in it. So maybe that wasn't grief, but this is just to show you that it takes this form. These are also some of the forms of grief, how it looks like. Somatic characteristics is basically you may have disturbed sleeping pattern. For some people, they cannot sleep. For some people, they sleep a lot, which is not normal to them. Some people, they cannot breathe, they have difficulty breathing, and maybe because they lose sleep, they feel fatigue all the time. And some people, they may also exhibit some of the physical symptoms of the deceased before they pass away. Like for some caregivers, for some caregivers, after the death of the loved one, from a specific illness, and then they may realize, I am experiencing the same thing. I'm getting breathless. I'm having chest pain. I'm having this pain and that pain, and it is all the same as what the deceased used to have, and then we get panic. So that is also normal. It is also part of your grief symptom. And for some grief, it is also manifested behaviorally. So that is through crying, social withdrawal. But for some people, they do not withdraw socially. They become over-engaged. They cannot spend time alone. They just need to be around people. So they may go out all the time, or maybe instead of not having the desire to work, they may overwork, do overtime every time until they just passed out. Yes, so there are many theories and many models to grief, and I would like to share with you two. So the first one that I would like to share is by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and Kessler. So Kubler-Ross she was a psychiatrist working with terminally ill patients. So as she worked with these patients, she has come up with the stages of grief: denial. So what she's basically saying is that an individual who is going through grief, they will experience these 5 stages of grief. Denial. They may say that, hey, no, this is not happening to me. They will be numb. They will feel shock. And then they will experience anger. Why did this happen? They will be angry at the doctor. They will be angry at God. They will be angry at the whole world. They are just angry. And then they will also come to a point when they bargain. Hey, if I do this, perhaps this will not happen. I have a patient recently. He is due because of diabetes complication, he is due for below-knee amputation. But because this patient, he's a driver, to lose his knee, to lose his feet, meaning he cannot work anymore. So how he bargains, he says, doctor, please stop, give me time, let me try TCM, let me go Sing Se, let me do this, let me do that. So that is a form of bargaining also. The doctors may not understand that, but for us who see this, we know that, okay, this is just some kind of grief. You are bargaining for more time. Hopefully, if I put this, despite whatever the medical result, this will help me and I can save my leg, I can save my feet. So that is bargaining. For some people, after bargaining, then they will go into depression. Depression has a whole range. It can be the mild depression, and it can also mean the clinical depression. And then at the end of the stage would be acceptance. This is when you are just resigned to your fate. And you start to learn to move on. But I would also like to point out that this model, these stages of grief, it is not without critique, because not everybody's pain is very clean like this. For some people, they may alternate, like sometimes anger, then bargain, anger, bargain, anger, bargain, and then okay lah, I accept lah, okay, what can I do? So I just accept, I just resign to my fate. But for some people, they don't even go through all this. They just accept, okay, this is what God has written for me, and I accept it as it is. So this model is not without its critique, because every individual's journey is unique. Okay, hang on. Okay, and the second theory that I would like to share with you is about mourning. So we have talked about mourning earlier. So according to William Warden, as we mourn, these are the things that we want to achieve through mourning. So it's 4 tasks of mourning that we have to complete in order for us to restore the equilibrium in our life, to restore, to achieve healing, to make it simple. To achieve healing, we need to go through mourning, and as we mourn, these are the things that we need to achieve during the mourning period. So the first one is, through mourning, we accept the reality of our loss. So how do we accept the reality of our loss? It can be, you go to the mortuary and view the body. You go to send the body to the graveyard and see the body being put into the earth. So that is one way to accept the loss of reality. As you see your loved one being shrouded, so you accept, yes, this is, I'm letting him go, I'm letting her go, and they are gone. And the second task for mourning that you have to go through is to work through the intense grief of pain. We have talked about denial earlier, right? We deny and deny and deny. Hopefully, when we deny so much, this thing will not happen in real life. But for mourning to achieve its purpose, we have to work through our pain. We cannot deny it. We cannot escape from it. The more you escape, the more it will just bite you and chew you at your feet, keep running after you. So basically, the idea is you sit down, face your pain, let it flow through you. Let it flow through you. So that's what it means here. And number 3, after you accept the reality of the loss, after you accept that this is pain that you're feeling, this is sadness that you're feeling, this is guilt that you're feeling, and it is part of your grief, you let it flow through you, you have accepted it, then you will have to relearn, you will have to adjust to a new environment created by the loss. For some women, the loss of a husband, it could mean the loss of a companion or the loss of someone who is a provider. So it is about them to rebuild their life without this person. For someone, for this particular woman, for example, having not working for many years, they have to learn, how do I be the provider for my family? So that is something new for them to learn. Relearning how to live without the loss, without the loved one who has passed away. So task 1, task 2, and task 3 have been achieved. Then task number 4. What is this task about? It is for you to establish enduring connection in creating a new life without the deceased. So basically, you find a way to maintain a connection with the deceased while you move on. So some of the examples that I can think of would be, like some Malays, some Muslims, they do tahlil, for example. They tengok like, okay, 100 days must do tahlil. This period must do this. Then every anniversary got something to do. So that is a form of mourning that they may be going through. This is what they are trying to achieve. So as they move on with life, they want to assure themselves and the rest of the family members that the loved one is not forgotten, that this loved one is still in our hearts, it is still alive in our memory. So there is no fixed time frame to a mourning period. So it can take months and it can take years. Because like I said, we can still be in mourning without acute grief, or we can still be grieving without mourning. Okay, so it varies. The length of time varies. So as we deal with the loss of loved one, we will feel this hole in our heart. It is never the same. The hole may be filled with other things, concrete or whatever. It may be replaced, but it will never be the same. There will be scars. There will be scar tissues. Okay, so how do we live with this loss? So number one, we have discussed it before. It is to acknowledge your emotions. Don't fight it. The more you fight it, the more you deny it, it will just stay with you. Okay, but it is painful, no doubt. So it is also about how do you reach out for help when it is so painful you cannot move, when it crushes you, when it pushes you down. How do you go back up? It is easy for me to say, hey, Fadhiilah says, oh, don't fight it, don't deny it, face it. But it is painful. It is painful. How do I deal with this pain? So I will touch a bit more on that in my later slides. So, but basically for you to move on, to live with this grief, you have to acknowledge that it is painful. You have to stay with your emotion and get it and face it. And then you may want to express your emotion in a tangible manner. So for some people, they write journals. For some people, they paint. For some people, it is also how they want to ensure the legacy moves on. For example, the loved one may have passion for a cause, passion for the disabled, for example, and we as and the person, the survivor, the survivor, we continue that legacy. We keep on working for the disabled. So that is a form of keeping this legacy alive. And then the idea of mourning is also about keeping on living, right? So how do you live with your grief? You have to choose life. Always choose life. And part of choosing life is to maintain your interest. Okay, again, I know it sounds very easy to do, but it is also about how you reach out for help so that all this can be done. How do you maintain your interest despite your grief? So you take care of your health, because whatever physical health that you have, it will impact your mental health. So take good care of your health. Your mental health, inshallah, will be taken care of. This one, be prepared for triggers. This is very important. You may realize, you may feel that, hey, I'm okay. I can function. No issue anymore. I no longer cry. I no longer have nightmare. I can sleep. I don't overwork anymore. Then suddenly, out of the blue, bam, you got chest pain, or something happened to you which reminds you of the loved one. So these are triggers. So some triggers can happen, for example, during anniversary of death. So I saw this movie once. There was this elderly. He is otherwise very healthy, but every year on a specific date he will be hospitalized. And then the doctor realized that is actually the anniversary of the death of her husband. Okay, so that is one trigger. Anniversary can cause trigger. And some other triggers could be perfume. You walk in the shopping center and suddenly you caught a whiff of someone's perfume. And this perfume is the same one that was used by your loved one who has passed away. Then it causes a trigger. So those are triggers. Just be careful of triggers. And to reach out for love and support to keep living, because this whole journey, this grief, this mourning, this bereavement, this is not to benefit the dead. This is all for us who survived the death. And in order for us to survive, we have to choose that we want to keep living. So in your times of pain, you need to reach out and seek help if you need help, so that you can continue to keep choosing life. So I would also like to share with you about planning for end of life. This is important. Why is this important? Because as you drown in grief, you feel very helpless. So it is good if you plan, it is good. It may give you a sense of empowerment, a bit more prepared of what's to come. So as you plan for end of life, it can be about your own end of life, or it can also be about your loved one's end of life. Or as you prepare for your own end of life, you can also help to minimize the grief that your loved one may face after you passed on. Okay, so what Freud said, if you want to endure life, you have to be prepared for death. Okay, so basically, it is about how we and persons we are caring for wish to live before we pass on. I would like to show you this short video, which I find very cute and relevant. Okay, it's starting. Okay. Poor Fugu. So thoughts about this video, when I first watched it, I was thinking, hey, it's basically telling us when you got to go, huh? So the method may vary. You may be sliced open, or you may jump into the walk, or you may escape from death, but if it is really your time to go, you will go. So, so this is why, before you go, we need to do dialogue. Not dialogue, it's dialogue, D-I-E-L-O-U-G-E, dialogue. You talk about dying, you talk about death, okay? A lot of people, they do not want to talk about dying or death to other people, to a loved one, for example, because we thought that, hey, we may not be prepared about it. We do not feel good about talking about death. But what happened is that sometimes, for example, if you are caring for older persons, they may be very, very happy to talk to you about how they want to die. You know, in some nursing homes in Singapore, what they do with the elderly is that they let this elderly talk to them about eulogy, like, okay, if you pass on, how do you want your obituary to be written? What do you want to be remembered? For some nursing home, they will also bring these residents to choose their own coffin. And these residents are very happy to do so because they are ready. They have achieved, they feel that they have gone through so much, they have achieved what they want to achieve, and they are just so ready for the next phase of life. The same is said about terminally ill patients also. We may avoid talking about death to them, but you know what? If you were to broach the subject of death with them, they may be very happy to share with you because they have a lot of thoughts, definitely. Okay, so some of the dialogue topics that you may want to take note of is advanced care planning. Okay, 3 minutes left. So chop one, ACP. ACP is basically a conversation that you may want to have with your loved one about how do you want to be cared for. I usually ask this question to my patients who come in, and I know that they are homeless, no next of kin. So I would ask them, Mr. So-and-so, the next time, if you were to come in, touch wood, but if you come in next time and you are unconscious and you have no family members for me to contact, how do you want me to care for you? How do you want me to tell the doctors to look after you? So this is part of the conversation. So the same goes with all of us. You may want to talk to our parents, the people we are caring for. If something were to happen to you, what kind of life do you want? What kind of intervention, like basically? Do you want doctors to break your ribs, do CPR, intubate you, cause you more grief? Because every person, they have their own idea of how they want to be treated. Okay, so advanced medical directives, some sort of like ACP, but it's more of just signing paper in front of witnesses. And AMD, advanced medical directives, it is a legal document. And then last thing, power of attorney. So ACP and AMD, it talks about your health, right? How do you want to be treated medically? So Lasting power of attorney, it is also a legal document. It will talk about, it's basically about you appointing someone to make decisions for you when you cannot make decisions anymore. So this decision will be about your estate, about your healthcare, about whatever you have. So during your life, when you cannot make decisions. So this is ACP. HOTA. Oh, this one, I know everybody has their own belief about HOTA, but I just want to preempt you. So part of this, because if you are suddenly certified brain dead, it is the law, we will take away some of their organs. So if you remember back in the days when you were 21 years old, you may receive a letter in your mailbox, right? So if you believe that I do not want HOTA, I do not want my organs to be taken for other people, please opt out. Please opt out. But if you also feel that, hey, why not? Why don't I just give my organs to other people so that others may live? Then you also need to tell your family members, prepare them, because it can be very traumatic for them to make decision. Or, okay, they cannot decide anymore. It can be very traumatic for them when the time comes. So ACP and all this thing I've talked to you about, it is also about preparing your loved one. Because when time comes for them to make decision for you, I tell you, it can be very traumatic. And they can also be feeling guilty. What if I don't choose this? Maybe my so-and-so will still be living. So help them by not adding on to their grief later on. Okay, so we have talked about grief. So basically grief, they are normal. No intervention needed, it will pass. It takes time, and for different people, different time. But there is also this thing we call complicated grief. So now this complicated grief, it only affects about 7 to 10% of people who are bereaved. So this complicated grief, it is characterized by extended grieving period or other criteria, including mental and physical impairments. So this one, it is not for us to diagnose. We may feel that, I'm having complicated grief, but it's not like that. Just like depression, the doctors would say that, hey, you have clinical depression. So it's the same with complicated grief, otherwise known as persistent complex bereavement disorder. So this is for the doctors to diagnose. So basically, if you are feeling, if your grief is prolonged and it impairs you, you cannot do anything. You cannot go to work, you cannot sleep, you cannot do anything for extended period of time, 6 months or more, go and see a doctor. Because complicated grief, it is not treated, it can lead to disability, negative health outcome, or even suicide. Okay, and this is very real. It has, for some people, they are more vulnerable to it. So it has been seen in individuals bereaved by disaster, violent death, or parents who lost children. They may feel that, why these people, why not me? How come I survive, but the rest don't? How come I survive, but these people do not survive? And then bereaved individuals with intellectual disabilities, individual with mental health issues. So these two, they are already vulnerable. And when they are confronted with grief, confronted with a loss, the grieving may be a lot more complicated. Yes, bereaved suicide and homicide survivors. In fact, suicide survivors, they have higher risk of suicide themselves. Bereaved children and adolescents, bereaved individuals with mental health issues. Okay, so where do we seek help? So these are some of the organizations where you can reach out to. SOS, Samaritans of Singapore, they deal with suicide issues. So the hotline is 24 hours. At any point of time, if you or you know of anyone who need help, you can reach SOS. AWA, Center for Caregivers, because caregivers, we are also grieving. Remember anticipatory loss? So AWA has Center for Caregivers, so they can help you with your grief. So ADA, Alzheimer's Disease Association, OJOY Care Center. OJOY, normally I would send my elderly patient dealing with grief for counseling, I would send to OJOY. AMP, Child Bereavement Support, SAMH, Club Heal, Counseling and Care Center, Singapore. I put here MSF, but actually what I wanted to say is Family Service Center. So there is one or a few in every neighborhood. Reach out to the Family Service Centers. And this doctor, yeah, so you may also need to see doctor if your grief is prolonged, and doctors may be able to channel you to where is appropriate. Okay, so basically in summary, grief is normal, grief is healthy. It is not something for you to fear. So to lessen your grief, to lessen your loved one's grief after your passing, you may want to take charge of your end of life by making advanced care plans. And then, however, there are also a certain group of people who may be more vulnerable to complicated grief, and they may need more assistance, more help. Yes, so that's all I have for you today. I'm sorry for the time, and I welcome any questions should you have anything else later on. Thank you.